welcome back. Welcome to season 2 of the Attachment Point News Roundtable with Nick Lamparelli. And today we have Justin Fowler, founder of NinjaRaider. And I saw about 14 other projects on there. Seems like a busy man who knows how to build things. Thanks for joining us, Justin.
Right on. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to having a fun little chat on a Saturday.
Yeah, absolutely. Justin commented it's better to create than consume when I said I was hopping back in the podcast saddle. So I was like, all right, this guy gets it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Nick, you were wondering what was going on with NinjaRaider. It's
really
good.
What's going on?
2.0. Yeah.
So we are updating our product map and trying to get out into more states. We started in California. That was like the hardest one to crack, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, I've added there's two things that I need to do strategically. I need to be in basically all states. And one of the biggest parts of feedback that we got from users, surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, a lot of people that are selling out there don't have data, right? Large companies have data sets, but if you're in sales or if you're in retail distribution, you have to go purchase that from a vendor of some kind or create it yourself. So one of the things that we do pretty well is aggregate data. A couple Python scripts here, a couple Python scripts, SQL scripts there. Before you know it, bam, we can compile data also. So one of the things we've started working on in the background is pulling all these business records together. Right now we're up to about 6 million business records, and we're going to get to about 20 million. And our concept on this is to add this as part of the feature set so that you can not only have rating, but you can also find people to go after based on certain criteria. And basically we just wanted to offer this as everything, basically you get everything for the subscription fee. So instead of
like a marketing tool?
Yes. Well, we didn't try to recreate, actual marketing tools like email campaign managers, stuff like that. There's plenty of apps that do that, but just the raw data, just getting access to that or parsing files is difficult for the average, retailer.
I think what Justin's talking about, sorry, jump in. I know 2 brokers, I don't think I'm giving away trade secrets, that just go after high X mods and go after companies and call them and say, hey, we're going to help you clean that up. So you're talking about bringing all that data in as part of your package?
That's right.
That's
awesome. So not only the XMod database, but things like the construction database, the contractors. There's a lot of different sources for information. A lot of the times, depending on the state, different governmental organizations or entities will distribute this information. The problem is the format that it's in is so horrendous that unless you're a big time nerd or you have access to tools like Python and MySQL databases, you're not going to be able to parse it and make it useful. So, and not every single person shouldn't have to do this, right? Like you should someone should do it and figure it out. So, but that was the biggest concern and I know, at least from being a retailer, having my own agency, I know that, growth is something that's hard to come by. Not only do you have to pick a target market, but you also have to match that up with what your carrier actually wants, not what they say they want, but what they're actually have an appetite for and what's profitable. So what I think we're going to see, and this is kind of a broader topic, what I think we're going to see, and this is what I'm calling it, the democratization of data analytics, right? It starts up at the high corporate level, and the well-funded, the well-heeled folks have access to some pretty amazing tools, but over time, that's going to work its way down to the small business. And everybody who's in that kind of space is going to need some form of this, whether it's piping in data to your systems for use, or some kind of analytics that can help you be more smart and targeted about who you're going after.
That's what I was thinking when you said democratization and you started to describe it. I kept thinking, well, the larger organizations can throw armies of analysts at it. A small business cannot, and they probably don't have the technical skills either. So there's a underserved need for someone to build something to make them on a level playing field with those that do have armies of analysts or data scientists or whatever.
I like how you're thinking. Sounds like you're thinking like an agency owner too, like how to put stuff in a functional format where you can execute on it and sell, which is great. And if it's saving companies money, they have that much more for payroll, everything else. I think it's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the crazy part is if we can, this has been my thesis all along, right? If we can free up the 90% of our time that we spend doing all these repetitive or not really profitable tasks, which is mostly data entry and a lot of, rote things that computers do well. If we free up all that time, we can use it to do the things that we actually want to do, which is risk management, which is train, managers and supervisors how to take care of their employees, train people, risk management programs, all these types of things. So that's the stuff that we really want to do, but we spend, I would say, the smallest portion of our time being able to do that. Right?
I could say play golf or like go fishing or,
golf, fishing.
Yeah, I could say quicker than.
I golf fish because I hit the ball into the drink and then I have to go fish it out.
I was gonna say if you had a shotgun in there, then you might have something interesting.
So Justin, what you're describing with Ninja Raider reminds me a lot of many years ago when I was day trading. I used to trade futures commodities, and there's the government releases every week. They release information on futures contracts, who's buying what, and they break it out by like large buyers, small buyers, institutional buyers, who's long, who's short. And I paid like $100 a month to get a subscription from someone who parsed it out nicely for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was just like, why am I paying $100 a month? That's ridiculous. I could do this myself. And to this day, I still could never quite figure out how to automate the whole thing. And I wasted so much time. It was just easier for me to buy the subscription. It was just ridiculous for me to even try. I just didn't have the technical ability because the government data was in a format where they're like, erroneous spaces, erroneous tabs. Mm-hmm. And if you're not on top of it, you're going to have like columns shifted over, things moving over to the next row. And like you need someone with expertise that knows how the government is, what mistakes they make and how to have automated tools that can clean that up for you easily. So it was easily worth $100 for me, not just for the data, but just to not have to do the work myself.
Well, you know what's funny about that? That's basically the iTunes model, right? Mm-hmm. So these guys already figured this out. How do we stop piracy, or how do we get people to pay for things that they were getting for free? Well, we just make it so much easier to do it the legit way and affordable that it's silly not to do it.
And less scary too, not downloading.
Just to tell you how stubborn I am. Even when iTunes came out, I would like order CDs from the library and rip them, and then store them. And then like every time I got a new phone or every time I got a new computer, I was just like, oh, this sucks. I have to upload a whole new set of data and then get it back onto my new phone. It's just easier for me to just buy it on iTunes. And that way it's always there. I never have to worry or think about it.
It's funny.
And that's basically been the model, over time. If you've noticed, that sort of SaaS model is the thing that seems to be working for most companies that provide, any kind of services like that. Mm-hmm. And it's efficient. We get some really great technology for a pretty nominal price. I've been doing some prototyping and some, like screen design and layouts, a bunch of nerdy stuff. But the amount of tools that people are able to create and push out is kind of amazing. And it's because of that model allows us to. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we jumped the gun. We jumped right into what new. Yes, we didn't even give the audience a chance to get a flavor for what is Ninja Raider at all. For those that are just like tuning in for the first time or don't know who JF is, What is Ninja Raider?
So Ninja Raider is a comparative rater for workers' comp, and the whole point behind it, I was a retail sales guy. I was an insurance broker, just like probably many people watching this. Mm-hmm. And what I wanted is a fast, very, very fast way to determine what the marketplace looks like, what all the companies are that are interested in the type of risk that I'm trying to quote, and what they're likely to charge. I want to get that information in seconds. I don't want to enter it in 15 different times to 15 different company websites, especially if I'm at the initial stage where I'm just screening or trying to evaluate opportunities, right? And the biggest problem is, at least that I experience in workers' comp, two things: training people how the sales process works that come from outside the industry or that are newer to the industry or newer to, right from college and things like this. When you try to explain how the sales process works, they just sort of stare at you and blink. They're like, you do what? You take a bunch of information, ask a bunch of questions, don't tell them anything, disappear, and then come back later, and then you present and you hope that you're somewhere close. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of how it goes.
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it's kind of silly, right? So if you think about it, the sales process that we do is actually backward, right? there aren't many things that you can buy where the price is a secret, where you don't get to know that until the end, right? There aren't many things left like that. And insurance is still one of those things. And the insurtechs are getting really good at this. They're getting really good at fixing this part of the problem. There are other parts of the problem that they haven't, solved yet, but that part they're getting really, really good at. And so I think that if brokers and agents and humans are going to have a chance to compete against the machines and stay relevant, we need to eliminate all that waste and get us much, much, much faster. Not incrementally faster, but 10, 100 times faster, which sounds ridiculous, but I can literally do 100,000 quotes in seconds, right? With 4 pieces of information, and I can slot it pretty accurately with 25 carriers.
It's interesting.
That's what I'm talking about.
You're going the direction that I see a ton of these tools. CoverWallet's been really impressive. They chunk down, 50 Accord form questions into 4, big bulk boxes. They make it really easy. I'm working with a company out of Canada, Fineo, that wants to do one platform prospect to policy delivery for long-term illness, disability, and for term insurance, but they want to use one question set to get you all those quotes.
Okay.
Yeah, we're simplifying it. Before, I think there was, motive to make it cumbersome and like clunky because you had like this mountain built up, but now whoever can kind of build up the fastest seems to be taking the day. That's cool.
Well, and there's an interesting debate. If you notice some of the online chats and some of the arguments that our folks are having, I remember I had a little discussion chain with Bill Wilson, and he was making the point that you can't really know a risk or understand what it is you're insuring in 4 seconds or whatever it is. And I understand the point's well taken, right? So if we are to add value into this whole process, there has to be something more that we do that we can still use human reasoning or our intuition or our experience to add value to the process. And I think that's really, we're trying to say the same things, but we're doing it in 2 different ways, right? I want to eliminate all the waste so that we can spend all of our time doing the things that do add value. And I think there's a way for us to have both is what I'm trying to argue. It's not either or. It shouldn't be agents or computers. It should be take the agents and make them 100 times more efficient so that they can, compete.
Yeah, not only like bionic man and computer. Yeah.
Well, and if you're following, all these AI, all these technological advancements, most of the people that the futurists, that's kind of what they describe. It's not really the dystopian future where the computers take over and eliminate us or turn us into batteries. It's more like we're going to use these technologies to enhance our lives or enhance our skills, right? I can just put a new chip in here and make the processor work a little bit better, fix some of the errors.
Well, the computers are using us, but as long as it's a win-win, we're out there, the warm body.
Relationship.
Right? Yeah.
They give off heat, they give off knowledge.
Exactly.
As long as they don't destroy the host, we're okay. But I think that's kind of that's the model that makes the most sense is instead of looking at this as a replacement, look at it as an enhancement.
Oh yeah.
Well, I think from a tech standpoint, when it comes to trying to quote, trying to rate with the most minimal information possible, there is a theory on in decision making that says you can still do that. What I think you can't do, I don't think you can ask like 4 questions and get the cheapest quote. To me, that's being extremely aggressive in what it is you're trying to do. But you can absolutely ask 4 questions and get a conservative quote and then say, if you give me more information, I can drive this down. But with the few questions I have, I know you're going to be in this this window of potential rates with the opportunity to come down. I can just tell you, like from flood, one of the key parameters that's where there's really no database of information is what's the first floor elevation. There is no database. So if we can't readily determine that, it's not like I can't quote it. I just assume it's 0 and move to the next step. But I always let them know, hey, we couldn't figure this out. If you can prove to us that the first floor elevation is positive, then you're going to get a discount on this premium. This is like the worst case scenario.
I won't name names or the product or the market, but there is one insurtech that's like 4 questions for a quote, and it's about 200% the cost of if you really buckle down and rate it out
Yeah.
100, like you're saying, so you can general broad brush,
Well, and so in part of the problem, the way we're trying to address it is that I think the goofiest part about this is most of these businesses or a lot of the elements of them, this is a known entity, right? So unless you're talking about a startup that just formed up or, sole proprietor or something like this, these businesses are around. They don't necessarily disappear, right? So having to ask the same questions every single time and not being able to pull in some of that and eliminate some of
completely.
that seems ridiculous to me.
I thought blockchain made a ton of sense for certificates of insurance, proof of insurance, records. But like you're saying, to be able to run off a database like that and kind of pull the relevant info without having to hassle somebody.
And my personal favorite.
You guys keep chatting. I'll be right back.
Okay.
He's going to get some food in Hong Kong real quick.
Yeah. And just don't jump into the water.
Yeah.
Stay with us. Stay with us. So there was something.
Plaid guys now the real conversation happens.
Yeah. The plaid rules.
Yeah.
So, he said something that I wanted to key off of, and I just forgot what it was. Any more coffee? What was he?
Talk about the information that was relevant, the first floor data being available.
Right.
Yeah.
And the initial quote or setting the table and understanding, where everybody sits in the competitive marketplace. The interesting part about that is, especially in comp, the pricing is really a function of arithmetic. So all those questions that they ask, those are the more sophisticated companies that have multiple writing carriers or subsidiaries.
Okay.
They use all of those questions to basically slot the risk, which does have an effect on price. But at the end of the day, it's one of X number of calculations, and that's pretty much it. So it's not as
labor, how high the risk is, what the payroll is, what that zip code tends to have claims wise.
And it's funny because if you study this over time, like I have, you'll see sort of the patterns of adoption. You'll see somebody comes out with a very sophisticated tiering model that looks pretty sophisticated. When you break it down, it's still kind of the same version of an old idea, right? Like zip code rating. So what carriers have tried to do is to get more precise about that, because just because you're in zip code 9027 whatever doesn't necessarily mean that you're in that industry that's going to be part of the problem for them or whatever. So I think the promise of all of this is I think we've all probably thought this for a long time, but if we can integrate all of this information to work together instead of using it separately, it would be much better for everyone. So the fact that we're lucky if we hear about claims trends and underwriting, trends after they've already taken place or after it's too late to do anything about it, at least in the sales department, right?
I feel like I want to distract us with one random question because I'm afraid I might have hurt my relationship with the Canadians that I'm working with. Is that actually Toronto behind you? What city would that be?
That's Boston.
Oh, is it Boston? Oh, okay.
No, it's Toronto.
It is Toronto.
Yeah.
That's the CN Tower.
Okay, cool.
Right
Sorry about that, guys. I should have known better. It's not Hong Kong.
And now I'm wearing a San Diego hat. I'm like all confused.
The Celtics right here.
Lamps is an international man.
Exactly.
I have a long vowel in my last name. Yes.
So what I was going to ask is, I was watching your video. You mentioned that you don't open up to all the carriers because it would slow things down and you have to ask a million questions. They're very strict on how to use their API. I think the early adopters are going to win, like most things. I might be biased because I know we're trying to talk some carriers into participating in Fineo's platform, but don't you think the ones that are going to get their information out the quickest, the ones that are going to make the apps accessible while still holding true to the risk parameters that they need, I just think it works in the long run. I'm not sure, and I'm not the earliest adopter. I mean, I had to get forced to buy a cell phone at 19 when they'd already, been out for forever. But I don't know. I just think you need to use technology to win, business wars, I'll call it. So.
Yeah. So I don't know that it's necessarily the early adopters that win. I think it's the smart adopters.
Stage too. Yeah. You kind of want to let the first guys go through the wall. Well,
and so we've actually been through all of this before, right? In 1995 to let's say 2001 or two, the .com thing, this, that, everything, right? how many of those companies survived, and most of them, the ones that had legs, were either acquired or absorbed into larger entities that had more resources. Right?
Insurance. Yeah.
And I told this story that there was a company that started at the same time. It was called eCoverage, right? And you've never heard of them.
Nope.
But you've heard of eSurance, right? Because one of them was bought by Allstate and one of them wasn't. And the problem is eCoverage was doing things in 1990s, late 90s, that companies can't do today. Their technology was that good. It was awesome, right?
That's cool.
And now it's poof. So I think that's the problem for the long-term usage and adoption of this. You kind of have to marry the two disciplines, and it's really hard to sync those things up. You're going to need completely different thought and incentives for people, right? So for the carriers, holding on to and making a profitable book is almost antithetical to growth. You're going to have to absorb more risk and have more long-term tolerances for those types of things, which doesn't bode well if your incentives are based on finances, right? This quarter or this whatever. So there's always going to be sort of that push and pull. But where I think we can all come together and make this more useful for everyone is if we share the data. So we were talking about earlier, why is it that claims doesn't pipe in a feed to sales to show them where the areas are that we should focus on, and where the areas that are less profitable, right? If I'm out there prospecting and we're chasing this group of risks that we have been told that are profitable, usually what happens is everyone runs in this direction. We load up the book, and then it starts to do what it does, which is become
happens all the time,
right? And you go, stop doing that, run over here, right? So instead, how about we just pipe in the data and show people how to balance it out, right?
There's one carrier rep that'll bring in like a hack together, like we sold this much of this line, this much of this line, this much of this line, to kind of let us know what their hot markets are.
Right.
It's kind of like what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, and that's always the worst, because that sort of anecdotal isn't really helpful. Yeah. Because if you go back and dissect that and look at where all those placed cases fit, there might be 10 different reasons that have nothing to do with anything you can calculate.
Fair enough.
You know what I mean? That's why that got placed there. So I think what a more holistic model would incorporate the underwriting and claims data sources in more of a real-time fashion to help us make better decisions on the field. I think that's probably the best.
Yep. I've been touting, listen, the Houston area has been hit with two major hurricanes over the past 15 years, Ike and Harvey. There were two different styles of hurricane. One was more of a storm surge, direct landfall, wind-based loss hurricane. The other one was more of a temporary dropping torrential rain, flooding from the inland and from the rivers and from the bayous. Two different styles of hurricanes. So I've always been under the philosophy you should go to where people don't want to go. To your point, Justin, like in real time, I would say if you have a property that hasn't been flooded by either Ike or Harvey, that's probably a property you want to insure for flood. Like
you survived.
Like what sort of storm is it going to take to finally flood those homes? Right?
You're going to get a big boat and two of everything. That's
But insurers think in like large swaths and geographic areas, and they can't handle. You mean we want to just underwrite this little neighborhood in Houston? Yes. Their heads explode. It's like, we don't want to write in Houston at all.
Well, here's a more insidious example, and this I love this. This is my all-time favorite. So whenever there's a large fire, which in California is always right, what do? Oh God, get out of that zip code for the next 10 years. We don't want to. So you have brand new construction, all the fuel is gone, and new standards to meet fire. That's the best neighborhood in the world, right?
Yep.
It's already been cleared out. And they go, oh, stay away from that. I don't
you couldn't buy terrorism insurance after 9/11.
Right.
Warren Buffett sold $1 billion policy to the Sears Tower, now the Willis Tower. No one else could even offer coverage because everyone backed off. It's like, wait a second, now's the safest time to write terrorism coverage.
When
Like the
like
government's
everybody's
down. Like what do we do? What are we talking about here? It is
140 million eyes are just focused on one thing, and it's a bad idea. You should probably wait.
I just it is a massive flaw in the insurance ecosystem and how they think that way. It's classic. You should be buying low and selling high, and when you run away after a big loss like that, you're buying high and selling low.
It's making the decision from a boardroom or an office when you didn't have the optics before. We couldn't do what we can do today. So now we get a micro target, and
that's all. I guess the thing that always frustrates me about this is it's kind of a zero-sum game, right? This stuff is mandatory. Someone's going to insure it. Mm-hmm. So if all of you guys are chasing 20% of the market and the rest of it is going to be insured somewhere, does that just mean you guys are that much smarter than everybody else? Or is there a different way to look at it?
Yeah.
Because this all has to be insured somewhere.
So that's interesting. Maybe a good segue would be Berkshire Hathaway just sold Applied Underwriters, which was their workers' comp arm. So Buffett's exiting. Is that some sort of signal or sign?
Maybe health insurance costs are going to go down. Maybe he knows something legislatively, because I'm sure healthcare is tied to workers' comp to a degree.
Well, so the Applied situation, I think, is a unique opportunity for them to exit something that was already beleaguered. So they were tied up with the state of California in a lawsuit that they lost and just never gained any traction on. So I think that damaged that operation enough to where they probably just shed it. That coupled with the fact that they have 3 other distribution channels, with the home state companies, with Guard, and with their direct channels, they probably didn't need to hang on to that portion of it. So Uncle Warren said, and we'll probably handle this another way. So I imagine they're just going to chop up the same market amongst the other channels that are probably more efficient than that operation was. If I was a betting man, if I was looking at the financials, that's probably what the story.
Yeah. Are there any class codes that you think are misunderstood?
I think there are several that are misunderstood, and there's one in particular that's been interesting to watch. Home health care, right? That started off maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It was 5 cents on the dollar. Then it climbed up to 7, then 8, then 10, and I think it's close to like 15. So in a period of 7 or 8, 10 years, it's almost tripled in price. And I understand the difficulties with that. Home healthcare workers have a difficult job, right? They're usually lower paid wages, and they have to do a lot of manual lifting of people that might not want to be lifted. So I think that's been an interesting one to watch, and the way that the pricing has gone up. And I don't know that the loss trends are really that dramatic for that particular class to have been sort of hammered as much. But that's one that it's a big enough pool of risk that I don't quite understand the necessity of taking as much rate on that particular area as they did. But I'm sure it's probably justified somewhere, but I'm not an actuary, so I should probably go back to stats class.
Yeah, fair enough. And I feel like we've done this podcast sort of in reverse. We started with like the really heavy Ninja Raider stuff, went to like what Ninja Raider is, went broad, and then now we'll finish it with like the intro. So Justin, you're up in the Bay Area native, or?
Yeah, I'm born and raised in California, and it's funny. I think if you watch this backward, there's a hidden message which it says buy flood insurance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, look at the water behind me. It's coming up over my shoulder.
It's subtle.
Yeah.
So, well, we need flood, and we need good workers' comp rates. I like it. Some cool projects.
And we need Kemba Walker and Nikola Vucevic.
I'd take Vucevic for
Celtics.
sure. Or Capella if you don't have to give up too much, but he's kind of expensive.
Yeah.
We're little basketball nerds over here. Somehow I ended up a Celtics fan. I think just to bug my dad because he's a Lakers fan. It's more fun. But
if
the Lakers get good, I'm going to be pissed.
Yeah. Right now, I mean, so top heavy to get one more star, and then they just have like high schoolers out there filling out the rest of the roster. Can't get anybody else. You a Warriors fan, Justin? Or?
Not really. I don't really follow sports that much. I'm not like a true nerd.
You're too busy building things, you know.
Kind of. I mean,
Yeah.
I got my nose in a book most of the time when I'm not doing that.
That's cool. No, that's good stuff. But thanks for coming on season 2. Here we go. All right, guys. We'll catch you next time. I appreciate it. Thank you. Good stuff.
Thank you.
See you, everyone.